MGTV, η ομογένεια κοντά σας.
My name is Eli Rizzo. Today I have the opportunity and I'm proud to introduce the Greek-American pilot legend, Mr. James Plackis, Dimitrios Plackakis, the real Tom Cruise. We now welcome Mr. James Plackis. James Plackis is former World War II B-24 Liberator bomber, pilot commander from USA Air Forces, predecessor, the USA Army Air Corps. Since then, continually piloting airplanes and helicopters for the past of 75 years, including the 38 years career with the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. You welcome Mr. James Plackis, and I would start with you with few questions. And my first question with you is, where did you came from, you and your family?
Well, I was born in New York City, but my parents came from Greece, from Zyros Sitia in Crete. I grew up in Corona, New York, until the teen years when we moved to Bayside, New York.
How did you enter to aviation and into U.S. Army Air Corps service?
All right. In April 1943, I had to register with the draft board at Grand Central Plaza in Manhattan. And they told me that I could wait for my number to be called up and I would be digging foxholes with the infantry, or I could volunteer to go right away to one of the services that I can choose next door. And so I said, okay. So I went next door to the Navy recruiting booth, and they did my eye tests, and they said, your eyes aren't good enough to be a carrier pilot, but why don't you go next door to the Army Air Corps? They'll accept anybody who can see lightning and hear thunder. I did, and in 7 days I was on a troop train going to the Army Air Corps.
And how old were you then?
Just 18 years. And
18 years old.
18 years.
Amazing.
Just turned 18.
Accomplishment during the Second World War.
At the age of 19, I was in command of the largest bomber in the sky at the time, the B-24 Liberator bomber, with a crew of 10, and still just 19 years old. And we were bombing the Philippines, Shanghai, Taiwan, and Japan. And during those 40 missions that we conducted, our members shared the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Air Medal, the Purple Heart, and the Silver Star, 4 of the best awards you can possibly get in the military. Yeah, this is the P-47 Thunderbolt. I flew that for 4 years after the bombers. At the same time, I was going through my schooling with the Virginia Air National Guard. 1946 through 1951.
I assume that everybody is amazed from what they hear. 19 years old, that's the way you start.
I didn't even have a driver's license yet, and I was flying the biggest
So
airplane in the
first
sky.
time that I was shocked when I hear that. So that's why I was insisting to introduce you to the Greek nation. My next question is the education following the World War II.
We World War II veterans were blessed with the so-called GI Bill, which was the biggest benefit for getting an education. I got my bachelor's degree, I got my master's degree, and I did postgraduate work.
Unbelievable.
It was unbelievable. I received the bachelor's from Virginia Polytechnic Institute, the master's from the University of Richmond, first year medical school training at McGill University in Montreal, and I'm also a graduate of the FAA Test Pilot School at Oklahoma City, and also attended the recurrency training that was offered at the U.S. National Test Pilot School. And during my college education in 1946 to 1951, I also performed the role of a U.S. Air Force fighter pilot with the Virginia Air National Guard.
Now, I'm going to ask you about the family situation following the World War II.
Following World War II, I married a lovely Greek girl from Brooklyn,
Nice.
whose parents were from Patras, Greece. We got married in 1952 and had 4 children and 5 grandchildren,
God bless.
and were blessed in every way possible.
Also, I would like to ask you about the aviation career, the FAA, and an update to the present.
Okay. I have spent a total of 75 years as a pilot and as a flight instructor in airplanes, seaplanes, helicopters, gliders, and balloons, having flown approximately 14,000 flight hours as a pilot in over 150 different models of airplanes and helicopters. 38 years of those 75 years were as an FAA engineering test pilot and aerospace engineer, with the final 29 years before I retired also was spent as the chief of flight test for the FAA Eastern Region. Upon retiring, the FAA designated me as a safety counselor and also as a designated test pilot engineer, enabling me to continue participating in aircraft certification evaluations whenever they requested it.
Now, how complicated was the cockpit of a transport airplane like the Gulfstream?
Well, I have a picture here that explains it all. This is what the cockpit looks like. It's got lots of buttons and lots of lights and lots of controls. And you damn well better know what they do and when to use them. That's simple.
Okay, and another very interesting question.
Yes.
That is going to be interesting for everybody, not only a curiosity, but those things happen in aviation and flying planes and helicopters. So what were some of your more challenges test flights?
The most significant accident was the crashing and trashing of the Boeing Vertol 107 helicopter in 1961. That was the helicopter that eventually New York Airways took and started flying from the New York World's Fair to the top of the Pan Am building. And this is a picture of the Boeing Vertol test pilot and myself. After they got us another aircraft because we burned up the first one, we had successful flight tests after that. Okay. Then there was the Omega BC-12D helicopter, which
Omega BC-12?
BC-12D.
Helicopter.
Yeah. Which had a control difficulty in crosswinds. And we ended up upside down next to a fuel truck. And had we punctured the truck, we'd all been burned up. The dual flame out, both engines quit with the Sikorsky S-61R helicopter when we were testing over the Long Island Sound. The salt water got into the engines and made them both quit, and we splashed down in the Long Island Sound. This was Christmas Eve, 1964. And Sikorsky had a rescue vessel standing by with my engineer on board there. And he called my wife on the telephone. We had no cell phones back then. He called my wife on the telephone, on the radio, and he said, I don't want you to hear it on the radio, but we're fishing Jim out of the Long Island Sound momentarily, and he'll be fine.
It's unbelievable.
And they towed the helicopter to Bridgeport,
Blessed.
and that was the end of that one.
Blessed.
And then there was one other one that was very significant, and that's being hit by lightning with the Gulfstream 3, the finest business jet in the sky, the Gulfstreams. And we were doing icing tests, getting the wings and everything iced up, and then turning on the anti-icing equipment. And we were doing great until all of a sudden we got a blinding flash in the cockpit. And we didn't know whether we had an explosion. We had no idea it was lightning at that time of year in February. But we were blinded for 2 minutes, and we had to get on the ground. So we declared an emergency, which is called Mayday, and we were over a strategic Air Command base, B-52 Air Force base, that we were in contact with. We said, we're coming in. They said, you can't come in. This is a secure B-52 base. We said, to hell with your B-52s. We're in an emergency. We're coming in. Then they said, well, it's below minimums on the weather. You can't make it. We said, to hell with the minimums. We're going to make it. And we did get on the ground safely. And we thought it was over until we landed. When we landed, they greeted us with attack dogs, armored personnel carriers, and machine guns because it was a strategic air command base and they thought we were an intruder. Finally, a half hour later, they found out we were okay, and so we sat there for a few days until Grumman fixed up the airplane. So that was it.
Again, unbelievable. We need to hear from you your professional awards and accomplishments.
Yes, the highest professional award in aviation is the Distinguished Flying Cross, which I received at the age of 19. Then the second highest one is the Air Medal, which they awarded me 6 different times during my 40 missions. And upon completion of the 40 combat missions, I was still 20 years old. I came home at the end of the war to hugs and kisses for a whole year. They wore out my cheeks kissing me.
We already accomplished a journey with all these amazing things with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the P-47 Thunderbolt. I flew that for 4 years after the bombers. At the same time, I was going through my schooling with the Virginia Air National Guard, 1946 through 1951.
It's unbelievable. So, I have a couple more questions
Yes.
about the awards and a member of an organization that you were included.
All right, I am a member of several professional organizations, starting with the National Transportation Safety Board Bar Association, the NTSB, the highest safety organization in the world. The second one is the International Society of Air Safety Investigators, who are outstanding in investigating accidents. Then I am a member of the Lawyer Pilots Bar Association, which deals with litigations about aircraft accidents. And I am a member of the Society of Experimental Test Pilots, a lifetime member, which includes Neil Armstrong and Chuck Yeager and all the rest of the big shots. And then I was also an adjunct professor at the aviation department of the State University of New York at Farmingdale.
I got into the last question, that is about the preoccupation since the time that you retired, 1995.
Yes. I've been retired for 24 years, and during that time, I have put emphasis on expanding my Christian spirituality and comparing Christianity against churchianity, which are two entirely different things and which give me great concern. I have been an active member of 2 different Greek Orthodox church-sponsored Bible study groups. I have been serving as the chaplain for the American Legion Aviation Post, and I have been providing advanced flight instruction and conducting FAA-mandated check rides to any pilot that is requesting these at no charge as my way of giving back to aviation for all it has done for me. I have been performing FAA aircraft certification test flights as an FAA designee whenever requested by the FAA, and have also been serving as an FAA safety counselor, and I also have been participating in aviation litigations as an expert witness, with the most recent one being about the Boeing company's liability resulting from the fatal accident of the Boeing 737 MAX 8 jet transport in aviation last March.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Boeing situation. Do you feel comfortable?
I can tell you what's in the newspapers. I can't tell you anything that's confidential because the lawyers won't accept that.
Absolutely.
But according to the newspaper, Boeing lied to the FAA on what the 737 MAX 8 consisted of. They put in an autopilot type of system to keep it from stalling. And it was supposed to have a certain strength when you get near the stall to get you out of it. But what Boeing put in their test aircraft, in their Ethiopian Airlines aircraft, was 4 times as strong as the one that they told they had, that they told the FAA was in there. And this is why the pilots were pushing with 100 pounds of force to get the nose down, and they couldn't do it. The autopilot was pushing them down to get them out of the stall, and they were pulling back by over 100 pounds, and they couldn't overcome it, and the aircraft crashed into the ground at 500 miles per hour. That's how bad the thing took over. And Boeing has admitted they made a mistake in designing it that way and not telling the FAA.
You're telling the truth.
And they will go almost bankrupt in the lawsuits. And the FAA has lots of responsibility on how loosely they handled the Boeing company. That's another story.
I still want to go back to the question for the Air Force One, that the presidential airplane.
Yes.
That we need to know. That's a really amazing thing, and it's an accomplishment that we all need to know.
All right. The FAA has an agreement with the Department of Defense, the military people, that any modifications of any type to the Air Force One and the Air Force Two fleet and the Marine One helicopter have to be evaluated by the FAA and approved to be safe for the president to go on them. And in the 1960s, I was designated by FAA as the aircraft certification test pilot for evaluating any modifications to the presidential Air Force One airplane fleet as well as the Marine One helicopter fleet, including President John F. Kennedy's Boeing 707, which I tested.
What an achievement.
Yeah.
And at the end, which we heard all this experience, this life story, the career, that it's incredible career. I want to say a few things. That James Plackis is truly a noteworthy Greek from the first generation of American-born infants, of whom we can all be very proud of for what he has accomplished and for his sincere interest in helping and sharing with ours. And at the end, what's next? What's coming?
The best is yet to come. Natoxelis.
Natoxeris. The best is yet to come.
In today's bulletin, you will find a short biography of each of these men who served our country so honorably. "94 years old. In today's bulletin, you will find a short biography of each of these men who served our country so honorably.
And we have to keep going
And at age
to
90...
reach the best that they coming,
Yes.
okay?
But at age 94, I'm not sure how long I'll be around to see the best coming.
Don't even talk about that. I see the energy, and I see how proud you are for what you did. something, big part of my dreams in my life, like everybody else. And thank you all for giving me the opportunity to interview Mr. James Plackis, the hero, the legend pilot that it happened to be our Greek fellow.
Που τα έκανες τόσο σωστά.
Long Islander, friend, Έλληνας, κριτικός. I love you and I thank you and I wish you all the best. Ένα μεγάλο ευχαριστώ. Γεια σου πατρίδα. Γεια σου Κρήτη. We thank you, Mr. Michael Giacomellos, for this opportunity to meet Greek homogenes and to be able to share all those life stories and experiences.
MGTVUSA. Οι δραστηριότητες της ελληνοαμερικανικής κοινότητας με βίντεο και πλήρες ρεπορτάζ. Επισκεφτείτε την ιστοσελίδα μας mgtvusa.com. Καλύπτουμε καθημερινά τα γεγονότα στην Ομογένεια.